They come for him fast, the seniors with sharp tongues and sharper egos, wielding mockery like a weapon, certain they've sized him up. A spilled tray in the cafeteria, lies scrawled across his locker, a trap set to break him. What they don't see is the fire he's learned to cage, the years of discipline etched into every muscle, the strength he holds back until the moment demands it. Behind the gym, where the air grows thick with dust and defiance, one fight will rewrite the rules, and not a soul will see it coming. The midday bustle inside Millstone High's cafeteria in Denver, Colorado, was a symphony of youthful energy and routine chaos. Trays clattered on formica tables, a steady hum of voices buzzed through the room, and the tangy aroma of freshly prepared pizzas and milkshakes mixed with the faint, comforting scent of cafeteria coffee. Overhead, fluorescent lights bathed the space in a clinical glow, illuminating every detail of the worn linoleum floor and the chipped paint on the walls. Amid the ceaseless chatter, groups of students laughed raucously, whispered excitedly about the latest school gossip, and shuffled between rows of tables in search of an empty seat. In the midst of this vibrant but chaotic backdrop stood Kareem Toliver, a 16-year-old newcomer whose quiet presence contrasted sharply with his noisy surroundings. Carrying a simple lunch tray with a modest sandwich, a small bag of chips, and a water bottle, Kareem navigated the crowded hallway with cautious determination. His eyes, observing everything with quiet intensity, held a mix of curiosity and vulnerability as he adjusted to the unfamiliar dynamics of his new school. Fresh from transferring into Millstone High, he felt the weight of every sidelong glance and whispered comment, each one a reminder that he was the new kid, different and, perhaps, an easy target. As he made his way toward a nearly empty table tucked into a quiet corner of the cafeteria, Kareem could almost feel the invisible pressures of fitting in. The murmurs of his peers, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the clanking of utensils, underscored an atmosphere that was both welcoming to some and exclusive to others. The steady hum of conversation was momentarily disrupted by a sudden commotion near the center of the room. Out of the swarm of chattering students emerged Justin Crow, a notorious figure among the upperclassmen, his reputation as a relentless bully already well known. With a swagger that conveyed unwarranted authority, Justin strode purposefully toward Kareem. His eyes narrowed as he spotted the new student holding his tray, and without a word, he leaped forward. In one swift, calculated motion, Justin snatched the lunch tray from Kareem's trembling hands. At that moment, scoffs and mocking laughter erupted around them. "New kid thinks he's somebody?" Justin jeered loudly, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with cruel precision. "Eat from the floor like the rest of us, man." The laughter that followed was merciless, a chorus of jeering giggles and dismissive snickers that reverberated off the cafeteria walls. Students craned their necks to catch every bit of the spectacle, while others, already accustomed to such displays, exchanged knowing glances. For a brief, heart-wrenching moment, the world shrank to just Kareem and Justin. Kareem's eyes met Justin's with a steady, silent resolve. Despite the humiliation and the sting of betrayal, his gaze was unflinching, calm, yet fierce. Beneath his quiet exterior, a storm of restrained anger and deep sadness raged, his emotions held in check but unmistakable in the frozen set of his features. In that charged split second, as the chaos of laughter filled the air and trays clattered to the floor, time seemed to slow for Kareem. The bundled mixture of fear, sorrow, and an emerging spark of defiance played across his face. He stood there, silent as stone, a stark contrast to the barrage of ridicule that surrounded him. The authority of the bully, Justin Crow, seemed to have reignited something within Kareem, though he refused to give Justin the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, he silently lifted his eyes, locking gaze with the smirking tormentor, and in that luminous, unspoken moment, the tension in the cafeteria thickened like an impending storm. As onlookers watched, breaths held and curiosity peaked. The atmosphere turned heavy, charged with the promise that this act of cruelty was only the beginning. In that poignant silence, before the laughter died down and the normal rhythm of the cafeteria resumed, Kareem's quiet demeanor spoke louder than any retort. signaling that the fight for his dignity had just begun. The day after the cafeteria incident, the halls of Millstone High buzzed with rumors and sideways glances. Kareem Toliver walked through a corridor lined with rows of locker doors, his footsteps echoing on the scuffed linoleum. The voices of students discussing weekend plans and the low, continuous hum of hallway chatter created a backdrop that contrasted sharply with the unease he felt. Every so often, he caught snippets of hushed conversations, mocking laughter here, a whispered insult there, reminding him that, as the new kid, he was an easy target. Before long, he reached his locker, only to find it in disarray. The lock had been tampered with, and on the door were crude scribbles mocking him, "Coward with no lunch," and "Scaredy cat swallowed nothing." Kareem's heart sank as he opened the locker to discover that someone had rifled through his belongings, scattering personal items around. In the midst of the chaos lay a single note scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. "New kid, steal my phone if you dare." His pulse quickened. Though his stomach still lurched with hunger, a bitter ice ran through him at the thought of another humiliation. Throughout the day, Justin Crow and his group made no secret of their contempt. In the classroom, between lectures on algebraic equations, their whispered jeers followed him like a dark cloud. At lunch, as he sat quietly in a corner trying to reclaim the dignity lost that morning, a group of older students approached. Justin smirked, his eyes glinting with malice. "Hey, Kareem," he taunted. "Did you find my phone in your locker yet? Or are you too scared to take it?" His words were accompanied by a chorus of mocking laughter that reverberated off the walls of the bustling corridor. The attack was not limited to words. Later, as Kareem tried to gather his books in the library, he noticed that his cell phone, which he'd tucked away safely in his backpack that morning, was missing. A sinking feeling took over. Whispers and furtive glances from nearby students confirmed his worst fears. Justin's cronies had taken it deliberately to frame him as a thief. It seemed every moment was orchestrated to break his spirit, each small humiliation pieced together to construct a trap. That afternoon, as classes resumed their monotonous cadence, and the school clock slowly counted down the hours until final bell, a searing determination welled inside Kareem. His mind churned over his options. He was tired of being bullied, tired of the stares, the whispered insults, and the sabotage of his personal belongings. Yet, he wasn't ready to explode in anger publicly. He had learned through painful experience that outbursts only made him the easy target. Instead, a plan began to form in the quiet recesses of his mind, fueled by the memory of the cruelty he felt when his tray was snatched away. Sitting at his desk in a nearly empty study hall, Kareem opened his battered notebook and wrote down the details of the day. A careful log of every humiliating comment, every act of vandalism, and every whispered threat. The cool scratch of his pencil on paper was juxtaposed with the swirling storm of emotions inside him. A mixture of fear, frustration, and a growing resolve to stand up for himself. His thoughts raced. If he could just gather enough evidence of the bullying, maybe the administration would see the truth. By the time the final bell rang, Kareem's resolve had crystallized. When he walked out into the quieter hall near the gym, he hesitated. Across the corridor, he overheard Justin's voice, dripping with arrogance. "Let's meet behind the gym after school. New kid, if you're not up to the challenge, I'll make sure everyone knows what a coward you are." The words sent a cold shiver down his spine, but also lit a spark of determination deep within him. That very moment ignited a plan. Kareem would agree to meet with Justin and his gang. The trap was set so he could finally confront his bullies on his own terms. The thought of such a confrontation both terrified and empowered him. He knew that his physical training in mixed martial arts, honed during long evenings in the local gym back in Chicago, gave him an advantage that many assumed he did not possess. That very skill, nurtured in the shadows of a difficult past, now promised to be his shield against cruelty. With his heart pounding in his chest and his hands trembling, Kareem clutched his notebook close as he scanned the corridor for any sign of a teacher. He knew that the meeting had to be spontaneous and unplanned if he was to unmask his tormentors. The weight of the trap, the stolen phone, and the mocking note all pushed him toward a decision that he had long been dreading. he would confront Justin behind the gym. His eyes, though filled with apprehension, burned with a fierce determination to reclaim his dignity. The tension in the air was palpable, the murmurs from earlier in the day now a low background hum against the crescendo of his inner resolve. With a steadying breath, he resolved that he would meet the bullies as they had demanded, if only to show them that he would no longer be their victim. In that moment, as the school bell echoed and the corridors emptied in anticipation of an impending confrontation, Kareem's silent stance spoke volumes. He was ready. After school, when the corridors had quieted and a tense hush fell over Millstone High, the fateful confrontation was set into motion. The hallway leading to the gym was nearly empty. Only a few stragglers remained as the echo of the last bell faded away. In this deserted stretch lit by the flickering fluorescent lights, Justin Crow and his gang waited with a mixture of arrogance and anticipation near the entrance to the sports hall. Across from them, Kareem Toliver, with his bulky backpack slung over one shoulder and notebook clutched tightly in hand, paused at the threshold of the gym. His eyes, dark and steady, were fixed ahead. Though his face betrayed no overt emotion, the fire of determination burned quietly beneath the surface. "Meet us here after class, new kid," Justin had sneered earlier that day as he had ridiculed Kareem in the cafeteria, an invitation layered with threat. Now, though the invitation had been nothing more than a provocation, Kareem had decided to accept. Not out of bravado, but to finally reclaim his dignity and prove that he would no longer cower under bullying. With measured steps, he walked past the nearly empty corridors and headed toward the gym, where the final showdown was meant to occur. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was charged with a raw, uneasy energy. The subdued hum of the ventilation system, coupled with the creak of worn wooden bleachers and the distant dribble of a basketball echoing off the high ceilings, created an eerie background score for what was about to unfold. A cluster of older students, having caught wind of a gathering behind the gym, had begun to silently cluster near the entrance, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Minutes later, the tension exploded. In a darkened corner near the entry, Justin stepped forward, his voice rising above the murmurs. "So, you think you can take us on, huh? I bet you're too scared to even stand up for yourself," he jeered, his tone mocking and purposely designed to taunt. His gang surrounded him like a pack, their eyes gleaming with anticipation for a fight. For a long moment, everything stood still. The challenge hung in the frigid air, as if the entire gym held its breath. Kareem took a deep, steadying breath. He remembered long hours in dimly lit gyms back in Chicago, where he trained in mixed martial arts, lessons in discipline, self-control, and the measured use of strength. Today, that training would guide him. Without a word, Justin launched forward with a sudden jab aimed at Kareem's torso. In an instant, the quiet boy moved with a fluid grace that belied his unassuming demeanor. He dodged to the side, his reflexes honed by years of practice. The force of the swing missed him by a hair's width, and the mocking laughter from the gang erupted louder. "Come on, show us what you got," Justin taunted, rallying his cronies. With adrenaline surging, Kareem responded swiftly and decisively. In the next heartbeat, he executed a precise counter-move. His trained arm swung in an arc that unexpectedly floored Justin. With one well-aimed strike, Kareem sent Justin sprawling to the concrete floor with a thud that resonated in the sudden silence of the gym. For a few heart-stopping seconds, time seemed to stretch. The sound of Justin's impact echoed off the walls, and an eerie quiet fell over the cluster of onlookers. The gym, until moments before a stage for mockery, had transformed into a silent arena where the unexpected display of strength had left everyone in awe. Eyes widened. Gasps turned to a collective hush. Some students froze, their faces etched with shock and disbelief, while others, who had long witnessed Justin's bullying, now looked on with a mix of vindication and fear. Dirty sweat and tension mingled in the air. Justin, now struggling to rise, wore an expression of stunned disbelief. His cronies, too, showed traces of shock, their earlier smirks fading into uncertain stares. The murmurs of the gathering crowd gradually died away, replaced by the heavy silence of a crowd processing what they had just witnessed. In the center of this charged moment, Kareem stood tall, breathing steadily as if nothing had shaken him. His eyes, unwavering and cool, communicated a quiet promise of respect reclaimed. However, before he could utter a single word or offer an explanation for his actions, the scene hung suspended in silence. The tension was nearly palpable. Every student's gaze, every subtle gasp, seemed to demand an answer from the fallen bully. And as the hush deepened in that moment after the impact, the only sound was the distant echo of a single, resolute heartbeat that symbolized the triumph of self-control over cruelty. The gym was alive with an expectant stillness, a prelude to further explanations that would soon challenge the assumptions of everyone present. The gym's echo had barely faded when silence settled over the assembled crowd. In the center of the gym, where Justin Crow lay sprawled on the polished floor, Kareem Toliver stood upright, his eyes calm yet smoldering with a quiet intensity. His breathing was heavy but controlled. In a measured voice that cut through the lingering tension, Kareem declared, "I never wanted any of this, but you all forced my hand." His words, resonant yet laced with regret, rippled across the stunned faces of the onlookers. Before anyone could react further, a soft voice spoke up from the edge of the crowd. Emma, a quiet, observant classmate who had recorded the unfolding events on her phone, quietly stepped forward. Clutching her device, she said, "Everyone, please look at this." With a shaky hand, she pointed her phone's screen toward the assembled students and teachers. The video she had captured, filmed discreetly during the commotion, revealed an angle completely different from what had been assumed. On screen, amidst the echoes of the fight, a subtle but unmistakable detail emerged. Justin, after lashing out and being knocked down, was seen hastily slipping his phone into Kareem's locker. The act was quick yet deliberate, as though he had been staging the chaos to shift blame onto the new kid. A murmur began to build among the crowd, swelling into hushed gasps of disbelief. Kareem's eyes widened slightly as he watched Emma's recording, his heart pounding both with vindication and sorrow at the cruelty he had endured. "I didn't steal any phone," Kareem said softly, his tone imbued with the weight of truth. "It was him who tried to frame me." His calm explanation contrasted sharply with the roar of injustice that had punctuated the earlier altercation. The video on Emma's phone played repeatedly on the small screen as more and more students gathered around, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. Some whispered to each other, "That's not how it happened," while others simply stared, mouths agape, as the evidence unfolded before their eyes. Even a few of Justin's cronies, who had earlier laughed at Kareem's expense, now exchanged uneasy looks. The realization that their tormentor had resorted to deceit to cover his tracks ignited a quiet ripple of disapproval through the group. As the recording ended, a heavy pause fell over the gym. Kareem took a steadying breath before speaking again. "This clearly shows what really happened," he said, his voice ringing with both sadness and determination. "I'm not the coward you painted me to be. I've done what I had to do to defend myself." His words were measured, yet in the stillness they carried a resounding certainty that sent shivers down the spines of those present. Justin, still on the floor, struggled to rise, his face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. His eyes darted around the crowd, pleading for someone to back him up, but the murmurs of discontent were impossible to ignore now. With his back to the wall and desperation creeping into his expression, he managed to croak out a protest. "This isn't real. You're twisting everything," he shouted, his voice cracking on the edge of panic. Before the situation could escalate further, the tension was punctuated by the sound of hurried footsteps approaching from the hallway. The murmurs grew louder as someone shouted for a teacher, and it became clear that the situation was about to reach a turning point. The atmosphere, once charged with youthful defiance, now teetered on the brink of official intervention. In that moment, every student and teacher in the gym held their breath as they awaited what would come next. The evidence was undeniable. The quiet resolve in Kareem's eyes and Emma's forthright act of recording had shifted the power dynamic entirely. As the tension mounted and the sound of approaching authority grew closer, The stage was set for a confrontation with the administration, a step that would force accountability upon those who had tormented a vulnerable newcomer. Later that afternoon, the atmosphere in Millstone High shifted as word of the altercation reached the higher echelons of the school administration. In a tension-filled moment, Mr. Lane, the school director known for his unwavering commitment to fairness, summoned both Kareem Toliver and Justin Crow to his office. The office, located on the second floor and lined with framed accolades and solemn portraits of past educators, carried an aura of authority and measured calm, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy that had erupted in the gym and hallways. As Kareem and Justin sat before Mr. Lane's imposing desk, a hush fell over the room. The director's gaze was stern as he pressed a button on his computer, and a large monitor switched on, displaying grainy footage recorded by Emma, a video that captured the events behind the gym. The footage was irrefutable. It showed Justin's gang jeering at Kareem, followed by the confrontation that led to Justin being knocked to the floor. Even more incriminating, the recording clearly revealed that after the scuffle, Justin had been seen hastily slipping his own phone into Kareem's locker, an act that distorted the narrative and framed the mild-mannered new student as the perpetrator. Mr. Lane's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Crow, can you explain what you see on this video?" he demanded, his tone measured but unyielding. Justin's face flushed with a mix of anger and panic as he stuttered, It wasn't supposed to happen like that. It was just a prank. A bit of fun." His words, brittle and unconvincing, elicited a sharp squint from Mr. Lane. "And what about this?" Mr. Lane continued, clicking to replay the segment where the phone was planted. "This act of deceit is unacceptable on any level. It appears you not only bullied your classmate, but also attempted to cover your tracks." His eyes locked on Justin's, searching for remorse or justification. But all he saw was a flicker of desperation. Turning his attention to Kareem, Mr. Lane's demeanor softened slightly. "Kareem, I commend you for your restraint and courage. You did not retaliate with violence, even though you had every right to defend yourself. Instead, you maintained your composure despite being the target of relentless bullying." Kareem's eyes, still quiet and determined, reflected both relief and a lingering sorrow as he listened. Mr. Lane paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the room. "Given the overwhelming evidence, including this video, which none of you can dispute, I have no choice but to take decisive action. Mr. Crow, your actions today have shown not only a blatant disregard for your fellow students' well-being but a calculated attempt to manipulate the truth. As such, effective immediately, you are suspended from school pending further disciplinary review. Moreover, this incident will be documented and presented to the school board for further action." His voice, calm but resolute, brooked no argument. A heavy silence fell as Justin's face contorted, alternating between fury and humiliation. The realization of the consequences began to dawn in his eyes. Meanwhile, several students who had been waiting outside the office, their anxious whispers barely audible through the door, now erupted in quiet approval upon hearing Mr. Lane's verdict. The decision marked not only a punishment for misconduct but also a clear signal that bullying and deceit could no longer be tolerated in any form. "As for you, Kareem," Mr. Lane continued, his tone softening into one of sincere commendation, "you have set an inspiring example for this school. Your dignity in the face of adversity is a lesson for us all. I intend to honor your courage by inviting you to address the student body at our next assembly." A murmur of approval rose from the few staff members present as well as from the students, a mix of admiration and hope filling the room. Before dismissing the meeting, Mr. Lane added, "Let today be a turning point. I expect all of you to reflect on these events and strive to build a community based on respect and truth." His words, echoing like a solemn promise across the walls of the office, signified not just an end to the incident, but the beginning of a transformation in the school culture. Justin, now pale and trembling, could barely meet Mr. Lane's eyes as he gathered his things with a defeated slowness. In contrast, Kareem remained seated, his expression stoic but his inner resolve shining through. It was in that moment that every person present understood that justice had finally begun to prevail, a lesson in dignity that would reverberate long after the echoes of today's confrontation faded from the halls of Millstone High. In the weeks that followed the tumultuous assembly at Millstone High, a profound change began to take root in the very fabric of the school's culture. The incident, with its undeniable evidence and public reckoning, resonated far beyond the confines of the auditorium. News of the case circulated through parent groups, community forums, and even reached local media outlets, sparking discussions about bullying, accountability, and the urgent need for reform in school dynamics. Parents lauded the courage of Tyler and the steadfast resolve of his father, Matt Reed, while students whispered about the day when pride was reclaimed and injustice was met with an unwavering call for change. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. Under the watchful eyes of the school board, a comprehensive review of bullying policies and administrative practices was launched. Director Ellen Clark and Mr. Lane, determined to prevent such humiliation from ever recurring, reformed the school's disciplinary framework with an emphasis on restorative justice and proactive intervention. New anti-bullying programs were implemented, including regular workshops on empathy, respect, and conflict resolution. A student-led committee was formed to hear grievances anonymously, ensuring that every voice, regardless of age or status, would be heard. The once toxic environment slowly transformed into a space where every individual had the right to dignity. Meanwhile, the consequences for Mr. Paul Harris were inevitable. Following the public outcry and the irrefutable evidence gathered by Matt and Tyler, Mr. Harris was formally dismissed from Millstone High. His abrupt removal sent shockwaves through the school, serving as a stern warning to those who belittled others for personal gain. Rumors that circulated later painted him as a cautionary tale, a man whose cruelty had cost him not only his job but also his reputation within the community. Though whispers of his future surfaced, it was clear that he would carry the stigma of his actions far beyond the school's walls. For Tyler, the impact was deeply personal yet transformative. The 11-year-old, once too frightened to speak up, now found his voice celebrated by his peers and teachers alike. In the days after the assembly, classmates approached him with words of encouragement, while teachers lauded his quiet bravery as an example for others who might be suffering in silence. At a special assembly held just weeks later, Tyler was invited to speak about his experiences, and with a tremor in his voice that gradually steadied, he recounted his ordeal with surprising clarity. "I never asked for this," he said, his eyes reflecting both lingering fear and a hope that only truth can inspire. "I just wanted my lunch, but I got something much more important. I got heard." His words, honest and raw, drew a powerful round of applause that reverberated through every booth and hallway of the school. Matt Reed, with his innate strength as both a father and an advocate for justice, found solace in the knowledge that his actions had brought about accountability. In quiet moments at home, he often reflected on the difficult years when he had to watch his son endure humiliation and hunger. Now, the community's response validated his decision to risk everything for the truth. Sometimes, he confided in a local interview, "It takes one stand, a single brave voice, to open the door for change. Today, my son's humility and courage have transformed not just our lives, but the entire environment of this school." The transformation at Millstone High did not stop with disciplinary actions. The administration, inspired by the incident, partnered with local youth organizations to launch a campaign centered on kindness and respect. Bulletin boards were adorned with inspiring quotes, and students were encouraged to share stories of overcoming bullying. Teachers adapted their lesson plans to include discussions on empathy and the value of every individual, regardless of their background or station. The once echoing hallways now buzzed with meaningful conversation, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the lessons learned that dark day. By the end of the school year, the narrative had shifted from one of humiliation to one of empowerment. The story of the confrontation became a legend, a turning point that was passed down in hushed reverence among the students of Millstone High. Even those who had once been silent spectators began to share their own struggles and triumphs, inspired by the actions of Tyler and his family. The legacy of that day served as a testament to the fact that true change begins when the vulnerable dare to stand up against injustice, and that a community united by empathy and accountability is a force to be reckoned with. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.